Hey, everybody. I'm S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 9, Episode 44 interview. We'll be talking with Stephen Graham King and discussing his latest work. So, let's get to know our guest. Stephen Graham King, they, is a disabled survivor of metastatic synovial sarcoma, a story chronicled in the memoir Just Breathe, My Journey Through Cancer and Back. Since then, he has concentrated on writing speculative fiction, in particular, queer-themed space opera. Queers in Space. Uh, sorry, it was my Muppets moment. He has been on a frequent guest on podcasts and panels, passionately advocating for lived experience, queer and disability narratives and stories of the future. They are also an avid black and white photographer, with two of their photos appearing in an installation art gallery of Ontario. Smell you. They are also working on a book compiling their intimate and immediate photos captured on the streets of Toronto, where they currently reside. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
All right. So for folks that didn't get to hear the last time you were on, why don't you kind of just do a quick, how did you get started in the whole writing thing? Obviously, you wrote the memoir, maybe talk a little bit about that. And then we'll get to what you're really here for, which is your latest work.
Well, writing came at me sideways a little bit. I was in a great class in my high school for creative writing. It was invite only. There were only 12 students, but it was this incredible mix of, cheerleaders and football player and the Mormon girl and the drama kids. And so we all studied different forms and learned them and wrote them and, critiqued each other anonymously. And it was this incredibly egalitarian environment that we wouldn't maybe have had. So I was at the time thinking I was going to be an actor and going to study theater, and that sort of fell by the wayside. And then I started writing in the late 80s, early 90s, various things that went nowhere or came back later. And the memoir was kind of a turning point in that writing about something so personal opened me up and I think made me a much better, freer writer, which led to the novels that have been published and rewriting some of the things that I'd written beforehand. And until the standalone novel was published, and then the Maverick Heart series, which is the big thing that I'm kind of known for.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about your latest work, Book 5 of the Maverick Heart cycle, Infinite Heist. What should folks know about the series, and do they have to read them in any particular order, or are they kind of standalone, or just kind of explain the series in general?
Yeah, they're all standalones, so you can really start anywhere.
Okay.
And I think if wherever you start, you just treat the ones that happened beforehand as a prequel. There are elements that carry over, so things change in each book, and that is reflected in later books. So yes, for the ideal perfect experience, start at the beginning, but if not, pick one that sounds intriguing and jump on in there, because every story is self-contained. I'm one of those people that hates cliffhangers. If I see one on a TV show, it will drive me up the wall. I always feel like it's a creator not trusting themselves and not trusting us to want to come back. I think there's an amazing sweet spot where you can leave people satisfied if the show doesn't come back, but ready to see more if it does.
Right.
And I think that can translate over into books as well. They can be.
You can tie up enough loose strings, but still leave some things open that could be explored elsewhere.
Exactly. Like not leaving everybody on the brink of death and then you have to wait 2 more years for the next book to come out. So there was a very
slow
important
death
thing
from hell.
Exactly. It was a really important thing for me to write self-contained stories that, yes, do follow on from each other, but they're contained. So the Infinite Heist was this was my pandemic book. This was the book that I had just started before everything shut down. So it was 20,000 words going into the pandemic and then months of nothing. And then a spurt where I would jump to 40 and then nothing for months. And so there was all sorts of different techniques that I would try to get myself moving again. And finally, I started with a new writing tool, a new program that allowed me to see all the scenes separately
Mm,
and in order, and allowed me to go, okay, no, that one doesn't go there, it goes up here. So I could mark out the B plot, which wasn't working, and so I could see how to fix that. And so all of a sudden, it all fell into place and came together, and finally managed to get the draft done and go through some editing and get it into my publisher. It was
excellent.
so
Okay.
satisfying.
Okay. So what if I walked up, excuse me, if I walked up to you at a book fair and I looked at the book and it enticed me and I asked you specifically, what does this story deal with? What would you tell me?
Well, it came out of a couple of different things. One, I wanted to incorporate some element of a locked room mystery where somebody disappears under impossible circumstances. So that was kind of a jumping off. That was one element. I wanted a couple of the characters who hadn't worked together alone to have to deal with solving the mystery and dealing with each other because suddenly this other influence isn't there anymore.
Mm,
And so they're having to figure out how they interact without that third person who was kind of the linchpin in their relationship between the three of them. So that was fun. And then I found I learned about rhodium, which is the most expensive metal on earth. $5,000 an ounce. And it's used in things like catalytic converters, and apparently
hmm.
now there are people getting catalytic converters stolen out of their cars and people getting killed when someone's trying to rob their car. And I thought, well, what's the futuristic, what's an equivalent of that? What can I do with that idea? And so it led me to this story about this incredibly powerful rare element. And the tagline that I came up with was, "What if you could steal the most valuable thing in the universe from every universe?"
Mm,
So it allowed me to play with some ideas that had been we'd examined other dimensions before in previous books. We acknowledge they exist. So what if you've got this thing that you can just keep stealing over and over again? But what does that do? That there are implications to that in terms of their own reality. So it became this sort of adventure of these people trying to find this person that they've lost, and there's this thing, and so it was a bunch of different elements that all sort of came together into sort of this fast paced. What the heck are we doing? We got to stop this thing, and just sort of led me on from there into a bunch of really fun places.
yeah, well, there you go. There you go. So what I don't want you to get spoilery because obviously we want readers to pick up the book, but is it like um Bradbury level queer sci-fi, or is it more like does it have like a dark humor to it? I mean, what how if it thematically, if I were approaching it, would you kind of sell it to me that oh well, if you like this, then you would definitely love this book.
Right. So the tagline, which I kind of uh, owe to Nathan Burgoyne, is Killjoys meets Firefly, only queer. So it's a ripping sort of adventure. There's friendship and loyalty and incredibly high stakes in terms of what the implications will be, but it's quippy and it's adventurous and it's kind of wild. It's not super scientific. Like I'm not a science person. I admit that. But I like to play with the possibilities, to look at what I know about science and
Right.
go, okay, but what if? What what if that would work? What if we could zip across dimensions, but bad things happen when you do that,
Right, right.
and
No,
that sort of thing. So it's got a bit of that kind of, if you're just looking for a good ripping yarn to pull you along and take you to a different place, then that's if that's your vibe, then I've got you. Uh,
it also kind of reminds me of like a soupçon of Guardians of the Galaxy kind of thing, feel to it, the way you're describing it.
there is a little bit of that energy as well. Yeah, maybe not quite as
In your face.
heavily into the humor, but there is sort of that kind of ragtag
One thing
band of
also like
misfits
the
who,
adventure, the rolling adventure of how, that's kind of what I
yep,
was going for, the vibe that I was
yeah,
looking for.
the found family ragtag band of misfits who just keep getting into trouble and end up saving the day is very much the energy that I'm trying to put out there.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Well, let's talk about a little bit about queer space opera genre because it's something that I dove into, but I'm doing it from a completely different standpoint. And I kind of wanted to get your feel of how you approach queer space opera. So, when we talk about that as a genre or a subgenre of sci-fi, what, how do you see it, and what do you think it brings to the table that is lacking in other sci-fi works?
Well, I think there is that sort of zippy adventure feel,
Mm,
which I think is significant. Uh, I know for me, one of the big influences that eventually affected my writing was being around in the late 80s and 90s with that initial wave of queer indie cinema.
mm-hmm,
So things like Parting Glances and My Beautiful Laundrette and all of those movies where all of a sudden I was seeing these stories that were told by us in our way
mm-hmm,
and about
mm-hmm,
us. And so when the initial idea for the first book in the series came about, it was just a question of, you know, let's let's make some queer heroes. Let's take those elements that we see in Star Trek and Farscape and all the novels that we've read and the classic old masters and just have queer people do it.
right.
So so it started out with a gay man and a pansexual woman, and then there's some polyamory going on, and then there was a character I had created and brought back in the third book and went, oh, wait a minute, she's trans. Of course she is. And so there's a trans character, a non-binary character, and there's an ace character, and just sort of looking at the people that you're creating and saying, okay, default for a lot of writers, and because I am a white man, I tend to go white man. So to be able to go, look, how do I turn this? How do I turn this on its side? How do I turn it on its edge? How do I take that initial assumption and go, okay, no, what else can I do with this? And so the fact that I get to take people who are all part of these stories and just reflect who people are. I mean, this the Infinite Heist has a character who uses a power chair, and the power chair, the fact that they use a power chair, has literally nothing to do with their place in the story and the point of them being there. And they interact with the world. So it was like imagining the accessibility, imagining what they do. You know, there's one point where they get everything goes kablooey and they get knocked across the room. And then, well, what does that mean for them? They have their own way of writing themselves,
Hoping, yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know, so making that person fully formed and relevant to the plot and who just happens to need to use a power chair. So examining those changes and looking at
And
that
I
is
love that you're doing that because I ran into a reader who was on Facebook, and she was differently abled, and she said one of the things she keeps looking for in works is to see some representation for that. And I love that you're doing that, because it is important that we include those types of characters in the story. They're there, it's like, it's why queer people started writing our own stories, because we wanted to be seen, we wanted to be reflected. And I think that it's nice when we go outside of wherever we are physically and actually be inclusive, because those people have thoughts too. They have feelings, they have experiences that are just as valid as, the everyday person walking by. You know what I mean? And I think it's
Absolutely.
nice when we allow those characters to be seen and be integral to the story as well.
Well, and making stories where either queerness or disability or things like that, they're not the issue. They're
Right,
not the problem.
right.
They just exist. And I had this discussion a couple of times this week about writing the futures that we want to see, because we need to model them. We need to present them as options,
Mm,
because who knows how many people are out there who don't think that these are options, who may not think that they have something to offer to a future that may come. And I read this amazing line. It was one of my friends posted it. And she said she stole it, and I can't find an attribution for it anywhere. But there's a line that said, "All futures are fiction until we build them." And I thought that was incredible, because it's so true. And writing about queer people in whatever way, or writing about disabled people, or writing about people of color, anything like that, and just having them be part of the landscape that we see in the future is so important uh, to help people think and envision the futures that we're all going to be part of.
mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things I think a lot of authors who try to be inclusive in with characters that aren't their lived experience is that they feel they're going to get it wrong. But I think one of the things they lose sight of is that even if you are in a power chair, or you are someone who's dealing with cancer, or somebody who maybe had a birth defect, or
Mhm.
some other thing that takes you away from the norm. um, and I use norm in quotes, because
Mhm.
what's normal? But that each person's journey, whether they're part of a culture or a race or what have you, each person's journey is different. I mean, there's a great comedian that's making big waves on YouTube, and his name is Josh Johnson. He's a black boy, black man who has an incredible, intelligent kind of humor. But he also keeps saying, if you didn't see me, you would think I was a white guy, because of the way so he lives in a space, and he has experiences. He shares black experiences that he had, because he grew up in the South, yet he lives in New York, and he has this sensibility and this way of looking at life that both is from the culture and outside the culture.
Mhm.
And I think that that's one of the things that authors forget, is that you can have someone from a given community, but communities are not monoliths. Everybody
Right.
has their own lived experience, and that will color how they see. It's one of the reasons why I write from perception, because perception is everything in humans, and we don't give it its due. What I perceive to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G is not what you would see it, because you will have different priorities, different lived experiences. So you filter incoming information in a way that may be different to me. And
Absolutely.
so perceptions, I think, is the game that we don't write about as much, but I think authors do. They just don't necessarily see that that's what they're doing, is that these characters come at it from different angles. How do you feel in writing characters that are outside of your lived experiences, but maybe someone you know or someone you've heard go through an experience and you wanted to explore that? How do you approach that when you're crafting your stories?
Well, I the thing that I heard once that I took to heart was that the difference between writing a queer person and writing about the experience of that, like an experience that isn't yours, that's, I think, that the minefield where you have to be really careful and do your research really intently, because I wouldn't feel comfortable writing the experience, the what it's like or what it means to be trans.
Right.
I don't know that. I wouldn't. I would if you know the character that is in my book is she's fine. She transitioned ages ago. It was and it was a challenge to write to get the information across when it's not an issue. How do you bring this up in context? And I ended up writing it as a confidence shared between two people who were getting to know each other, a
Mm-hmm.
piece of information that
Mm-hmm.
that one person shared with the other, um, because that way it's about the people, and it's not, oh my god, I've had this horrible experience. I don't want. I didn't want that. Absolutely, like nobody cares. Nobody's worried. Nobody's bothered. Um, the one tenet for my books has always been queer is never the problem.
Yep. And to
Uh,
be honest, we had a couple of years back my granddaughter who's queer and another queer high school student from a school that is in Wisconsin that is has primarily a queer student body. And one of the things they told us was that they like stories. I think we had come up with the subject of Love Simon when Simon and the versus the Homo sapien agenda of the book. And one of the things they said, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I love that I have a queer granddaughter because she keeps me in check. In that she kind of gives me an eye and an ear into their generation, and she's a millennial. And so, what I find really interesting about her um, is that she said we want stories that where being queer is not the coming out experience that's already happened. They want to be queer, and it's the and that is more
yes,
important to them, and
yes.
that they move in the space as a queer person, but it's the and part of their labeling of who they identify as that makes the story interesting.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I just read this book. Sorry, tangent time. And science fiction trilogy, far future, and all this sort of thing. And towards the end, this one character, this looks at another one and says, "I'm really a man." And it's just all of a sudden there's this trans character, and I was like, not something I expected from this author. And it was there, that it turns out that the medical technology was there, and they were like, "Yeah, no, it's easy. We can do, yeah, we'll take care of that. You'll be fine in a couple of days." But it was so close. But the character said, "I'm a man," to this other character. But then that other character didn't start referring to them as he until after the procedure was done. So the rest of that initial conversation is still she said this, she wanted this, and I was like, oh man, you were so close. You were so close.
Mm-hmm.
And I give him absolute props for writing it in the first place and for trying. And for the most part, it was a really good representation. But I just sort of like, oh man, one sensitivity editor,
Yeah,
and you
would have
could have, yeah,
clarified
and
that
you
and
could
fixed
have
it. Yeah,
elevated this
yeah, yeah,
to perfection. But I think we have to look at those steps. We have to take those and go, this is something. It may not be everything, but it's something. And what do we learn
right.
from these things that that come close but don't quite make it. And rather than criticizing when people do that, go, look, what about this? Maybe next time think about this.
Right.
So I think that's
And I think it's
exactly
interesting because, we look at like, I'm going to use a show that's blowing up on the YouTube for many reasons, but one of them is the issue of race. Um, Interview with a Vampire, the TV series.
Mhm.
I find it's really interesting. I've been watching a lot of Black um, reactors and commentators about the show, and knowing where the book came from, knowing the Anne Rice writing it in the 70s, and and what her whole deal was in writing it. But I find it really fascinating to hear Black voices now part of that conversation that probably didn't really feel like they were part of the story when it was the movie with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, which is closer to what the book was. But
Right.
um, throwing it with the race element in there opened it up to a whole new audience who suddenly thought, oh, I can be part of this conversation. And it's really amazing how, as you say, you're so close. You're so close to something that you could trip into that would just make it, you know, the
Perfect.
chef's kiss of whatever it is. And sometimes we don't see it because we get in our way. I mean, do you feel like that is something that as creators we need to really evolve and try to dive into?
Absolutely. I mean, I I like I mentioned earlier that the idea of interrogating that initial impulse, I'm going to make this character X. Okay, why? Why?
Hmm.
What's it? What? Where does this come from? I get it too with characters. I will go, some character will be race bent, gender bent, whatever, and I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, one will come up, and I'll go, that's not right. And then I have to go, okay, wait a minute. Why this? Why this situation? What is making me react badly in this one situation? What is making me resist this particular thing? So I actually I was at CanCon on the weekend, which was fantastic. And one of the discussions we were having, someone uh, talked about creating a character. We were talking about gender and bodies and things like that, and had created a character that he thought of as female because the character was really nurturing. And all of us on the panel kind of went, okay, look at that. You need to examine that because that's cultural. So maybe there's a way to spin that and interrogate that
Do the
initial
thing
choice.
that's unexpected because it will definitely garner some interest.
Yes, exactly. So like that process of having the idea and then immediately sort of going, okay, wait, why do I think this? Why do I think this should be this? What can I do to make it more interesting or make it new or at least make it not cliche and or not reflective
Mm.
of
Hmm.
biases rather than something that serves the story. I mean, the number of times in all of these books where I've gotten almost to and the final draft, I'll be like, no, this needs to be something else.
Right.
I need
And
to
it's
do this. I need to turn this. I need to flip it over. I need to do something other than this initial idea because there is more that I
mm,
can do with this. There is something more interesting that I can add or layer on to this
right. Right.
to
Well,
make the story better.
and I'm glad you touched on biases because that's one of the things that I fell into that trap. When I wrote my first story, I had it about two boys that were white. Well, I'm Latino and Native, and yet I wrote a story about two white boys because that's kind of was my bias that that's what the story should be about. And when I wrote an ethnic character into the story as I was progressing through the story, the only ethnic character I wrote was a Latino woman and she was the maid. How fucked up is that?
Wow. Yeah, those things just I mean, I had written the Ghostlight Burn, which is the last book, there was a character who had been really badly hurt in the previous book. And I wrote the entire book as if it was like magical technology has fixed him and everything is fine. But well, no. What if we play with the idea that it isn't a magical cure narrative? It's, yeah, we saved your life, but there's still some lingering
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that go on, and it was not easy. And there was trauma, and there was baggage that went with it, and there was physical things that I could still write around and still make him function in the story the way we needed him to. But suddenly you're like, well, okay, no,
Right.
not everybody who goes through these things is perfect afterwards. I certainly wasn't after, after I was sick. My leg doesn't work the same way. My body doesn't work the same way. My lungs are messed up. So what it was like, what can I do? What's this thing that I can layer on
Right.
that will elevate this somehow? And I think that's so much of the of writing is just like I said, always interrogating those decisions and interrogating those
Yep.
choices and making
Absolutely.
sure that even if you interrogate the choice and go, no, I was right. This is what I wanted. That's important to even be sure yourself that you've made the right choice and you've done the thing with the character or the situation or the event or the actions that you wanted to, and that you've wrung every bit of story and emotion and relevance out of it that you can.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, is there something about the book that I failed to ask you that you want listeners and viewers to know?
Oh, um, excuse me. Not that I can think of. I mean, it's if if you've liked my work before, I think you're gonna like this one.
Okay.
Um,
If
if
you're
you
new,
haven't, if you're new, it's if you want something that will grab you and zip you and take you away into some world where people have adventures, but also really work hard at loving each other and taking care of each other, then I think you're going to have a good time. I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll just pick it up and want to
and
find
run
out
with it.
where it
Okay.
all goes.
Perfect. Perfect. Couldn't have asked for a better way to say it.
Are you curious what Wrote Podcast is all about? Wrote stands for Written on the Edge, and we are here to bring you weekly discussions about LGBTQ storytelling. That's right, all genres, all mediums, wide open. So our guests will share personal accounts of living their artistic lives, their personal experiences writing, crafting, stories, music, filmmaking, all of it. But what we like to do is explore the edges of what's accepted and where storytelling should be headed.
All right. Well, are you ready for our get to know you questions?
I'm ready. Hit me.
Okay. All right. So, in this year of diving deeper, what's your favorite writing snack or drink?
I don't tend to snack while I'm writing,
Okay.
but I'm a
That's
tea
probably a
drinker, so
good thing.
there will usually be a mug of tea beside me. Nowadays, my one quality time of writing is some friends and I have set up a writing night where we meet at a pub just up around
Oh,
the corner from where I live, and it's like a 3 hour block, and we chat for 10-15 minutes and then write to the next hour and then chat for 10 minutes. And it's usually a pear cider and some kind of sandwich to have for dinner because they have really nice food there. So that tends to be that. The new thing is a pear cider and something to nosh on in between. But if I'm home, it'll be a big hot mug of tea,
okay.
probably.
Well, excellent. I love that. All right. Well, what books did you read growing up?
Oh, I read all kinds of stuff. Uh, I came to science fiction really early. I was 3 with my sisters watching first run Star Trek in
Hmm.
1966 and imprinted on it and never looked back. And so things like Edgar Rice Burroughs,
Uh-huh.
So Tarzan and, Carson of Venus and all of those, I would just devour. Uh, if it had something, if I looked at the cover and it was something to do with space, I would probably read it. So I read Asimov, I read Arthur Clarke, a big Robert Heinlein fan when I was younger. So lots of that to sort of get me going. But I would read other things. I would read mysteries, and I would read, when I was older, if I would find a single queer themed book in the bookstore downtown, chances are I would buy it and read it just because the 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 joy of just finding it in the
Mm-hmm.
80s,
Mm-hmm.
just tucked there in amongst the general fiction, to just sort of go, okay, I'm going to take this.
Yeah.
So
Ah.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
It almost
It
glows.
was the most amazing thing to find. And some of them I still have on my shelf that they followed me through
Right.
the years. Uh, so
Okay, excellent. Well, who's been the biggest supporter of your writing?
oh wow, there have been so many, so many. Um, Nathan Burgoyne, absolutely. Just lovely has been in the corner. I made him cry on the weekend because I dedicated this new book to him for all the stuff.
Oh,
So right there in the
we
dealer's
love
room,
us some Nathan.
I got tears. But no, I mean, I've had friends who have read drafts, and I have a little group now that, you know, that I will send to go, okay, what do you think? What am I doing? Am I on track? So my friend Kim, who I know from Saskatoon, always, 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 always in my corner. So there have been so many people that just always want you me to do well. And so
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing that people don't get when you're doing. I mean, one, it's a very lonely craft for the most part, and two, someone else's success doesn't take away from your ability to have your own. So it's not a pie. You know what I mean? You can cheer other people on and really champion them, and and know that if you're doing it for them, they're going to do it for you too. They get
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. I'm occasionally still not great at that. I will still occasionally sort of go, when something great happens. But I mean, ultimately, like you said, it is a lonely thing that you do by
Right.
yourself, and it
Hmm.
takes a long time. Writing the book takes a long time. Selling the book takes a long time. If you sell the book, getting it from that contract to the release is a long time. And
Hmm.
so it's really easy to lose sight of what you've done,
Right.
what you
Hmm.
accomplished, because you're going through the mill, and a lot of people are trying to find an agent and trying to find a publisher and trying to find an audience and trying to, so anybody that will support you and encourage you is a fantastic thing that you absolutely need to treasure.
Excellent. All right. Well, are you a morning person or a night owl?
I have become a I don't love mornings, but my my job is I have to be ready to work at 8:30 in the morning. So I'm up at quarter to seven, and I'm in bed by 11. And I learned a long time ago that even when I'm not working, keeping as close as I can to that schedule is infinitely better for my mind and my brain. I think if I was left to my own devices, I would probably be a night person. When I was younger and working in restaurants, you would work till 11 or 12, stagger home, stay up till 2, sleep till 10,
Uh-huh.
you know, through the
Totally get
day.
that.
And I remember really liking that because it's kind of out of sync with the world
Right.
a little
Right.
bit, which so you could get things done.
Plus, I also like that it's off like rush hour hours, so
Yes,
you slip between the
yes,
cracks.
yes, exactly. So I have become used to being up in the morning, and I need a little bit of extra time to sort of really wake up and get my faculties about me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, what's your favorite hobby outside of writing?
It's the photography.
Oh,
I
yeah.
am still taking pictures. I set up a mailing list. So basically I just every morning you get a photograph in your email at 8:30, and there'll be a little sort of description of why I took it, why I think it works, where it is, what it says to me, how the why I feel like it's important. Um, so that's the big thing because it's such a completely different flex of different muscles.
But it still is storytelling in a great degree.
It is, and that was another conversation I had this week that it's where writing is crafting a story, photography is recognizing a story.
Right. Yeah.
It's like you're out on the street and
Being
you're
in the
looking
moment.
around, and it's like if you see the thing and go click, that's it, you're done. It either worked or it didn't, or you can maybe fix it a little bit of in
Post.
editing.
Yeah.
Fix it in post, exactly. But it's recognizing something in that arrangement of people and objects and light. So it is it's still a story, but it's that instant sort of, did I see something there? Was I right in what I thought I saw? So
All right. Well, has writing and publishing novels changed the way you see yourself?
yes, I think it's taken a long time, and I always sort of forget to sort of stop and go, okay, yeah, I did this. I made this thing. This thing wouldn't exist if it wasn't for me.
Right. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I tend to forget that even though there are people who have written and published a lot more than I have, that I look to, there are people on the other side of me who haven't published or written as much, or just starting out, or just trying to make that first sale, or are new. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I suppose I might be to them what these other people are to me. That there is something. I did this, and I often joke about having me and my 6 fans. But learning to remind myself that for everybody that I know read the book, there could be any number of people who read it and loved it, but they don't write reviews, they don't they don't send messages, they don't talk about it. They just read it and love it and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And so there could be any number of people that I've connected with. One of my friends, my friend Kim, who I adore, said to me one day there was a person that she met online who loved my books. And I was like, oh, please tell me that you bragged about knowing me. And she was like, of course.
Love that. All right. Well, choose amongst your children. If you would write a spin-off novel about one of your side characters, who would it be? They all lean in.
There's a character that I wrote in Ghostlight Burn who was this sort of little mild-mannered ship pilot who got pulled into it all and had to rise to the occasion and did, when it was called on. And he's just sort of, I think it would be interesting. He's got this kind of ramshackle ship that looks like nothing. And it might be fun to sort of
But there's
dive
something
into
there.
his world, dive into his world a little
Right.
bit and see
Right.
what this universe looks like for him.
Right.
So it could be. We'll see.
We'll see.
Maybe that's
All right.
on the
All right.
agenda.
Fair enough. Have you ever traveled as research for your book? Please say you've gone to like a different planet.
Oh man, I wish. If only. I have not. It's because it's all coming out of here. It
Right.
tends to
Right.
sort of. I mean, I love travel shows. I love science shows. I love history shows. I love absorbing all of that. I haven't had the chance to do a lot of traveling in my life, mostly due to money, but I figure learning about places and learning about their history and learning about their cultures, if it's the next best thing. If
Yeah.
I can't go there, I'm going to learn about them
Right.
as much as I can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Final question. How do you celebrate when you finish a book?
Wow. I've racked my brains about this because my mind sort of goes blank as to what I do. I mean, I will often just sort of sit with it. And I tend to sort of go, sort of a moment of peace. There's a moment
Exhale.
of exactly. It's sort of like I did it. I got here. I didn't think, every book I've been, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if it's going to come together. I don't know if it's going to work. And then it does. You just, okay. Okay. I'll probably have a cup of tea. I might order food. I might
Well, I
have
think a good
somebody.
part of it is for authors, we're constantly in a cycle. So as you finish a book, you've got something on the back burner that you're probably going to bring forward, and then that book's off to edit. So then the edits come back, and then you're still writing this other thing, but then the edits come back, and so you're in this cycle.
It's like, which thing am I working on right at the moment? Which is this? Exactly. So it tends to be much more of a sort of quiet internal, okay,
Right.
I'm here.
Right.
Have a cup of tea, order some pad thai from the Thai place up around the corner. Just sort of take that moment to go, I did it. I managed it
Right.
again.
Right. There you go. There you go. Well, you made it through the list. Bravo.
Yay!
All right. So where's the best place for people to keep up with what you're doing, and what do you got going on that people can look forward to?
You can find, I would point people towards my website, stephengrahamking.com. Very first thing you'll see is all my socials. So you can pick your poison, whichever one you prefer. You can find me there.
They're literally poison.
Some of them
we
are
won't
better
get
than
into the
others.
social media.
It's true. But yeah, the online's usually where I'm talking about stuff. You can see pictures on various things. So yeah, start with the website and branch out from there. You'll find lots of little places to go from there. I am waiting for edits. I wrote a collection of essays last year.
Oh, how lovely.
I turned 60 last year in April, and I sat down right after the new year, and so I thought, I think I got some stuff to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I had read a couple of really good books that were essay format, or Minnie Driver wrote a beautiful book of 6 essays that was sort of memoir, but broken up into like thematically. And I fell in love with that. And I read a book called Gay Bar, which was part history of famous gay bars and part the author's own gay bars that they'd been to. So I sat down and wrote an essay about the one gay bar that we had where I grew up, and the experience of going there for the first time, the experience of, we used to have these Saturday nights where my friend Kim lived above me in the apartment, and we would meet at her place at 11 o'clock and drink wine for an hour, and then all troop over the 4 blocks to the bar, dance until closing time. And every weekend we would do that, and there would be different people who would show up. So I wrote about all of this experience of the bar and dancing, and what dancing meant to me, and the fact that I can't anymore. My body doesn't let. And that just sort of exploded into falling in love with books and falling in love with writing and SF and all of those things. And so they just sort of grew into this collection, and my publisher decided to take it. So it's with editors right now. So there's that, which will be coming out at some point. And I'm also working on book 6 of the Maverick Heart series, which may or may not be the last one. I'm not consciously setting out to end things, but it feels like a good place to stop if I decide to, if that makes any sense.
Right.
It feels like a story that could be an ending. I mean, I may get to the end of it and immediately have another idea for the next one. So I will keep going if there's more ideas, but I'm about 80% of the way through that one. So that's coming too. So there's essays and another novel coming at some point. Sure.
Okay, excellent. Well, everybody, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Stephen Graham King for being on the show. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brett.
Absolutely. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you can get alerts from new episodes. The show is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to even sign up as a guest, visit www.roguepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media.
closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.